And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I think we're live. We're coming to you correct today from the Oz, the great land of Oz, on 1 second, I'm getting feedback on 5 platforms: LooshTube, DLive, Fakebook, Be Sovereign. If you guys can go support us on Be Sovereign, that's the place to watch us. That's Sayer G's new platform. And I am getting a little feedback. Is that you, Bear? You guys can go support us on Be Sovereign. That's the place to watch us. I'm hearing me. I hate hearing my own voice.
It was Bear last time. He had YouTube open. He was like, I didn't know.
I don't know what's happening here.
It's okay. I haven't hit record yet. Yeah, you got something open. We won't blame it on the boomer status either. I promise you.
Hey, I have nothing. I have no windows open.
You got something. Check. Okay.
I closed all my windows. Anyway.
Okay, we're good now.
We're
good.
I'm sure it was one of you guys.
Yeah, probably me.
Probably Mike.
It's the gremlins.
I try to coach him on these technical things, but you know.
We'll blame it on the gremlins. Well, I'm going to hit record and fire this up. We've got the great Tom Barnett with us. So blessed to have him on here. He's been having quite a ride over there of late. So I'm going to hit record and we will start the podcast. And welcome, everybody. Welcome, everybody who's joining us on the stream today. We love you all. And this is going to be a fun one. So let me just pull up one thing real quick. I'll do my little intro, Tom. We'll throw it over to Bear and then we will go. Okay. And boom, we're back for another episode of Alfacast. I'm Mike Winter, and I'm here as always with Dr. Bear Paul Lando, the cowboy wizard, coming to you live from his abode, his magical cavern laboratory on the beautiful South Fork of the Smith River. I'm coming to you from the Middle Fork in the great state of Jefferson, where freedom still reigns supreme. We are loving life. It's gorgeous out in the beautiful spring here. My bees are buzzing. And the flowers are blooming. We're getting fruit trees in the ground today. We just lost a chicken though. So as soon as this podcast's done, the kids and I are going to go. It's perfect timing, actually. We're going to go bury the chicken right where we're putting this fruit tree in. So this chicken will now feed this fruit tree and we will live off this chicken for the next year. And this was by the way, one of my son's ideas. So I'm teaching them well, Tom. I'm teaching them well. The circle of life is always doing its thing here. We have Tom Barnett on with us today. We're going to go deep into what's going on in Oz right now with the weather and with the community consciousness that's erupted and all the great things really that are coming out of this quote unquote crisis. And it's fantastic stuff. We're Bear and I were just on a really fun podcast yesterday. That's coming out probably in a week. It's called the Tinfoil Hat Podcast with Sam Tripoli. That was a lot of fun. I think we're going to be kind of we're going to hit some normies there, some more normie norms. They're going to discover us. So that'll be fun. And just been really active, getting the word out about all the fun things about the magic of this realm and how we can play with it. We'll be talking a lot about that today. I've been putting up a lot of Orgonite videos and what we're doing, messing around with the Orgon energy. And of course, Bear and I are planning to make some big old boomer cannons to chembuster the classic Wilhelm Reich cannons. So we'll be documenting that. Hopefully, Bear, get to that next month even maybe. And start building those. So, because the times now, we have to get those. Absolutely. Yeah, we got to get those in.
Mitch will be envious of us when he sees ours.
Nice. So we'll document that for y'all. But hey, we're on Be Sovereign now. We're streaming on Be Sovereign. So go please support us there. BeSovereign.com. That is Sayer G's platform. He's really supporting us there, really pushing us as one of the bigger channels on there. So that is where we want to focus. Of course, we're on DLive still, but barely. I don't know. DLive's kind of dying. And we are still on LooshTube, Fakebook, and Odyssey. I love Odyssey. That's actually really the only decentralized platform we're on right now. Cordo will get there though. We're getting closer and closer to having Q apps on, and then we can stream purely decentralized, and you can take part in the network in a way that's actually much more sovereign than Odyssey, which is using the Bitcoin network, which has a lot of problems and isn't as decentralized as it really could be, and actually is co-opted by fiat and all that stuff. So check out Cordal too, cordal.org. Okay, that's enough housekeeping. Let's get into this. Alfacast friend Tom Barnett returns to share his recent adventures in the political swampland and on the front lines of weather manipulation in the land of Oz. Tom Barnett is an authentic modern-day warrior, and his straightforward solutions and insightful commentaries are especially welcome as we now witness the attempted imposition of global tyranny. Tom is going to stop by today. He's here with us now to tell us about his foray into the political swampland, because we haven't talked about that since we had you on last, Tom, and give us his perspective on the unusual weather patterns and floods afflicting his Australian homeland. We'll compare our own observations of weather manipulation here in the States to discern its contribution to societal chaos and detrimental effects on personal health. Tom is the founder of Global Biodynamics, which has become an impactful voice in the world of education, health, finance, organic farming, conservation, and much more. The art of thinking for oneself is a central theme in his seminars, retreats, and corporate events, where Tom shares his eclectic background as a facilitator in holistic healing, education, business, and athletics. As a holistic health practitioner who studied both conventional and alternative methods, his questioning mind has given him a unique point of balance in several different fields. He has been a political candidate, practiced true law, authored popular books, and has lived homeless and without money. He's also a surfer and a brother that is one of my favorite humans on the planet. Bear Lando, Tom is back. How great is this today?
Awesome. Doesn't get any better than this, Tom. Good to see you, buddy. And surfer should be at the top of the list, by the way. That's that holds the highest level of esteem in my eyes. But hey, always great to have you here. I know you've got a lot going on down there, floods, all sorts of natural things happening, but, we have bigger fish to fry up here in the States, Will Smith and the Oscars and all that kind of thing. So I guess we'll kind of deviate and talk about some other things down there. So, you're always busy about 6 different fronts at the same time here. So why don't we let you tell us first, what kind of projects you're up to and new little things. I know you've been busy in politics, and then that took some interesting turns. Maybe you could share that with us if you care to. And then we'd really like to go deep into the weather wars and like Mike said, compare notes, because, looking out our own windows here, man, they're up to something out there. So thanks for being with us. We really appreciate it. And tell us what you're up to.
Yeah, sure. And thanks for having me, guys. It's always a pleasure to come on the show. It's the political thing's interesting because one of the projects that I'm up to at the moment is that we're setting up a community-based council. So we haven't named it yet, but the working title is a wisdom council, because people are familiar with what a council is. You can't really call it a wisdom council until there's wisdom in it, and that's decided by the community, but that's the working title. And what it will do is it will hold the city council accountable for their actions and also be a source of support for the community. So people can come to this council and get support, hold council accountable, and really tap into the way things are or should be naturally and have been for a long time, except for in recent times. So when I ran for politics, was not that long ago, was for the mayor position of our town. And the reason that I did it, guys, is just because, not that I really wanted to, but because the community wanted somebody to step up. There's a lot going on, as we'll discuss, and everyone knew that there was a real importance to have somebody who could see things for what they are and call it for what it is, rather than just another corporate shill, just filling the boots, but not really stepping up to be of any use to society. And so they took me off the ballot. So the Electoral Commission that oversees all of the elections in Australia, they took me off and didn't put me back on. So I'm suing them currently, and I have a really, really strong case. So that's going to lead to certain things, which I can talk about down the track. But what's really happened with the advent of what we've seen, which is the flooding, people are seeing how little that the governing agencies are actually doing, and how much it's the community that's doing everything, which has been a big blessing because people are seeing who the real mayors of the town are, who the real doers are, and who's really providing solutions and helping people to stay afloat, so to speak, no pun intended, with the floods. But they're also seeing not just that side, but how little the government does. And now that's starting to crack open a few more mainstream minds. And I haven't heard the one you guys did with Sam. I'd be really interested to hear that, but I'm pretty sure this one's not going to be a normies podcast with what we're going to talk about with today's session. So should be fun.
Well, and to be clear, we did not go normie at all. Like we went normal Alfacast. And so I think we're going to blow some normie minds. And yeah, so Sam's great. He was loving it. But no, we want to go deep and we want to go, there's so much to cover here, Tom, but I love the fact what you're talking about when you were running and how you were like, I don't want to do this. I'm doing this because I'm being asked to do this out of service. And that's really what a statesman was supposed to be. Wouldn't you say, Bear?
Yeah, in the early years of this country, in its formative years, nobody wanted to be a politician. Everybody just wanted to work on their farm, and they had to be arm twisted into serving a term. They went off to Congress only a few months out of the year, did their business, and went back home, and then reconvened next year at the same time, and it was considered a part-time job. And then, of course, nobody wanted to be a career politician. Now, what kind of douchebag would want to be, right? So yeah, I mean, that's the way it's supposed to be. And of course, America was founded on limited government, so there's really not that moving parts to deal with. You have a limited function. You're told what to do by the people. You're true employees and lords. And here we are, boy, we're back into a feudal system again. And I know in Australia, it's the same darn thing. Even at the smallest municipality, it's a corporation and, has nothing to do with the natural government for the people, by the people, and all that kind of good stuff. So, continue on.
Well, yeah, even here, this is supposed to be one of the most free-thinking places on earth. Mm-hmm. And the people that are all in politics are all ambitious. They're the type of people that should not be there. And then they're obviously not, they're in it for themselves. And there's even the people that we've known in our community in the past that you would call good people and who said, yeah, I'll get in there and I'll start to try to make some inroads and I'll make changes and I'll break down doors and things. And they get in and they don't do anything. And then this is a common story, by the way. You talk to anyone in the community who's known these people for years and they start to pull them aside. They're like, dude, what's going on? Like, what's going on with this development? And what's going on over here? You said you were going to, where's your voice? And they just start going, oh, well, there's nothing you can really do. You just got to, it's like, no, what are you doing? And then it turns out, and then they start coming clean. They go, well, my kids have got to do this and go to school here and that. And it's like, you've sold out. You sold out, haven't you? And then they just try to run out their term so that they can, and these, no one's done it as far as I'm aware. People get in with good intentions, but it seems like a lot of people are for sale. And the current mayor, he's no different. We helped him get in because there's a bunch of real nasty ones that were running in the election that I ran in. And that was one of the reasons that I was asked to run, because we had to stop some of these really nasty ones. So after I was taken off, we collected what my vote would have been and put it to the lesser of evils. Well, let's get this guy in because at least it won't be that guy who, definitely shouldn't be around. And so we got that achieved, but by no means do we support the guy because he's still just, he's a corporate shill, as you say. He's spineless. He'll bow down to the state and take it up for some money. And it's pathetic. It's not what a mayor should be. A mayor should stand up for what's right. And what's funny is that if I do get in any way in that space again, I'll actually bring it up to everybody in the community and I'll say, you might not agree with me or like me, but don't you want somebody who's willing to be ostracized and hated and whatever for standing up for what they believe is right? Or do you want a spineless jellyfish who's just going to do what the state's going to say? And that's kind of where we're at. That's what a statesman, as you said, would have been in the past, being willing to do it, to stand up for the people and what's right, and not, what the corporates in the state wants, because that's just doesn't serve anyone.
Yeah. Years ago, we discovered a process where we could go after a person's bond and impede their ability to be indemnified in the public. And I'm sure Australia is the same, where they have to be indemnified, insured in case they do harm in the public, which they're doing all the time.
Mm.
And so we started going after people's bonds, and we actually did it successfully in a few circumstances. Now that technology has become a little bit more widely known here in the States, and in the state of Illinois, they actually stopped all the mask mandates and such, and the stuff going on in the school by threatening to take people's bonds. And it actually worked. You had people running for the hills and starting to behave themselves. So have you guys started doing anything like that down there?
Not as much. No, we should. Whenever I send people notices that are in the public capacity, I always make it known that they must provide their indemnity insurer information. And if they don't, then that's an offense. So it can be used it's usually something that'll be used later in the game, not in the initial stages, because most people ignore that part here. It is slightly different, our systems. Australia is a lot more lawless, and it's more of a pirate country than the States. So yeah, similarities, but it has to be handled somewhat differently, as far as I'm aware, unless we just haven't cracked that code properly yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Bonds for the Wind is I shared this with you, Tom, a few weeks ago. They're an organization specifically for the schools here, with the whole, vax and the whole jibby jab and the mask panty, or the face panty deal. They're going after specifically the insurers and the the bonds for the actual school boards, and are having great success. So, and it all goes right up, it routes to the Bank of England. And of course, and it goes to like one financial, like 8 guys, 8 guys at the end. That it's pretty wild, as we know. So, but they're having great success, guys. Check out Bonds for the Win. And I think it's time now to just kind of grab them by the balls and start doing this. Tom, so where are you now in terms of your community? Are you guys open to going more in the private and just and kind of moving away from, well, and we'll get into what's currently going with the flooding and everything, but with what happened with you trying to run for mayor, I know you're suing and stuff, but do you still think there's a political solution there at all? Or is it just time to now start separating, going completely in the private?
Yeah, I don't believe there's a solution there, and I never did. And that was part of my campaign, was educating people on that. I never believed that for a second. A lot more people are aware over the last couple of years because of what Corona brought through, which was people needing to find themselves more, and then finding out about the public and private, finding about what their rights are, finding out that they have an entity that carries their name. And all these things were very, very new to people 2 years ago, but they're starting to become a lot more aware of it. Which is funny because, like Bear says, like he was doing this 40 years ago. So it's nothing new. But while people are just easily able to go about their usual distractions of having coffees, going to the movies, getting drunk, going to parties, going to their job that's not really their work in life to do in the first place, they're always distracted. They don't really care because they've got their benefits and privileges. They go, I got a bank account. I can buy burgers with anytime I want. I can buy drinks whenever I want. I can go to my mate's place whenever I want. Can get wasted whenever I want. And so there was never really any need to figure out what their rights were, because they didn't even know. They thought they had it. They thought that's what their rights are, not realizing that those are benefits and privileges afforded by the state, which benefits the state. The state's not going to give you anything that does not benefit it. So while people thought that was benefiting them, for me, I don't partake in that I don't judge it. People can do what they want, but that kind of lifestyle is not for me. Because I realized through my gift of getting really sick and losing my health that that's not going to serve me. So I've been taking a different path, and it doesn't rely on benefits and privileges. It relies on rights, and rights come with an inherent responsibility. And that's the benefit of the state world, is that you don't really have to take responsibility for anything. You got insurance for anything that you might do wrong. You got like fake money coming in and out of your bank account, and the government's taking some of it. And then you've got, roads to drive on and all that sort of stuff. Those are all benefits and privileges. But you don't come with a lot of responsibility. Some, yes, but not a lot. So for me, rights come when you go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish.
Oh, well, to me, rights come when you take full responsibility for what you create moment to moment. No teeth in your mouth. So there's no teeth there to like support you if you fall over. If you fall over, you got to pick yourself up. And as part of that, you're part of a community that will help you rise as well in the private. So yes, to answer your question, short version, Mike, is that more people are becoming aware of that. And yes, that's what creating our own community council is all about. Creating solutions, food security, creating educational systems and resources, creating different value-based currencies. I'm really interested in Caudal, actually, which we can, there's a guy here who who's trying to hook me up with that. I just need my own place that I can have somewhere to live properly, and then I can set up the Caudal. So, yeah. But go ahead, Bear.
I was going to ask you, are you familiar with, here in the States, they call them CAFR, C-A-F-R, Confidential Annual Financial Reports. Have you ever looked into those down under?
No.
You know what, have you ever? So a while back, good number of years now, it was discovered by a gentleman by the name of Clint Richardson. By the way, I'd like to get him on here someday. He found that there's 2 sets of books in every municipality. Surprise, surprise, right? Including the state, federal government. So all of the tax dollars go in there. Then they have a whole insider trading, slush fund where they're just taking the tax money, making billions and billions and billions. And then every year, all the different localities furnish the, not the financial report, but the budget for the year. And the budget, of course, sounds like we only have this amount of money to spend, for roads and so forth. But in reality, if you look at the CAFR, and I've actually verified this in places where I've lived, the real set of books shows it has nothing to do with the budget, and there would be enough to pay the yearly budget like a zillion times over. And this little slush fund, that's not only the bulk of the money that we give them, but also, just exponentially multiplying through their insider trading schemes is, just spread around them, and they share the spoils of war. So that's another thing I'd really like to see come more to the forefront. Again, it was publicized a while back, and all of a sudden, nobody's ever heard about it again, but it's still going on. And in this day and age where we think that there's no money and all this scarcity, in reality, even though it's all fake digits, still, they're spending it. We aren't. And I'd like to see a global expose about, the 2 sets of books and start taking our money back.
Well, funny you say that, because I didn't know it by that term, but I learned when I was learning through Mark Patelic that our tax dollars don't pay for anything. They don't pay for roads and schools and hospitals and all that. No. That does go into this separate fund. And what every level of government does, from federal right down to local council, is they all borrow from the IMF every year. So it's like this, it's 2 separate streams, like you say. And that keeps the country constantly indebted to the master corporation, which owns the corporation known as Australia and the United States of America. And that it could all be discharged easily with a bill of exchange, for example. But when in Australia, there was some rich guy that actually offered to bail out the country, and he was told by the IMF, he's like, nah, this is our racket. Like, step out of that or you won't be walking the earth anymore. And they were like, oh, okay, well, so yeah, we've been in this cycle ever since. And I totally agree. It doesn't need to be taken by force or protested against. It just requires putting it out there for people to see. 2 sets of books. How do you like that? And the people then will just go, actually, this is not what we want. And then that's the end of it, really.
So just like here in the States, Australia, we're still the colonies, even though we think we won the Revolutionary War. Go ahead, Mike. Sorry.
I was just going to say, imagine actually, and I know a lot of people give certain elements of blockchain a lot of fluff because it should, a lot of flack, because it should, because most of it is corporate controlled, centralized. But imagine having a truly publicly owned, legitimate, totally transparent ledger where we saw where the flow was going in and out, which is what it's supposed to be doing. That's what currency is supposed to be, flowing in and out transparently. Imagine if we actually had that. there is something very powerful about that. So I just want to, I envision that in the future, it's going to start in the private with what we're doing here. And as we show the great success of what we're doing in the private, then we'll be able to then take back some sort of new idea of what a community consensus derived leadership can be, right? Whether that is a republic or not, I don't know. I don't know what that's going to look like, but to have that ability to have a public transparent ledger that we can all see. And I know, Tom, we can talk about a little bit of that, what some organizations are doing in Australia. Well, we have the good organizations, the quote unquote good ones, and and the bad, and the ones that are just stealing money for what we'll get into with the floods and stuff. But to have that ledger where everyone can just see, like, okay, I put the money here and we can track it and we know it's going there. And then on the flip side, you have your private currency too, where you can then have that private, nobody sees what you're doing. I see that as being an amazing technology that can do a lot. So just putting that out there.
No, I did too. The only thing, because I like to look at, play devil's advocate and not always assume that everything's going to be roses and fairies and all that sort of stuff in a land of utopia. And one of the things that is still that I see as at least a potential is that not enough people are yet able or willing to take full responsibility for themselves. And so as these corporate structures crumble because of the fakery of it all, and we can show it, we can show there's 2 books, there's this and there's that, and you don't have to do that. But for me, a lot of people, and it was highlighted in the Matrix movie, that a lot of people will still say, I know this is an illusion. I know this isn't the real world, but ignorance is bliss, because they want mummy and daddy, and they want mummy and daddy because they just haven't dealt with their traumas yet. They haven't got to know themselves enough. I think obviously more and more people exponentially are stepping into that. And even if it's difficult to begin with, and you have to figure it out, you have to break a few eggs before you can, what's that expression, make an omelet, whatever it is, you know what I mean? If they have to screw it up a bit, they're willing to do that now, which I think is amazing. So I'm definitely seeing this, what people call the Great Awakening. But I just think that it's not going to go straight to being awesome. I think there's going to be, I pissed on the floor, I just wet the bed, I just did this, I did that, I don't know how to clean my own clothes. And then eventually through that growing phase, we'll become adults. And
I had a vision last night in a weird dream that I was dead, and my kids were old and they were like a grandpa. And then it was like finally happening. We finally... Great grandpa's vision is finally happening. It was the weirdest dream. And I was like looking down on it as they're like running on these like beautiful farm kind of cities, and everyone's playing in this, not utopia, but like a better vision of what a civilization can be. Really trippy dream. But yeah, it's going to take a while. I mean, I don't know if I'll see it in my lifetime, but no reason why we don't fight for it. And I would say the pandemic is literally a symptomology of what you're talking about, all these baby adults looking towards their mommy and daddy, which are basically it's an abusive generational relationship we've had for a long time. And now it's finally the reality slapping us in the face, at this point.
Well, we really need a near-death experience to wake up. A lot of people, of course, who have taken the lethal injection are never going to wake up. In fact, they aren't going to last too much longer. So we have the culling on one hand, and that's okay. If you want out of the simulation, get the heck out, because you're just a drag on the rest of us. And that isn't a mean thing to say. It's a matter of personal choice. Then on the other hand, we're definitely just starting to get the little bit of the storm clouds over the horizon. We haven't seen anything yet. And I don't look at that as doom and gloom at all, because it's exactly what we need. If I look back in my lifetime, all those events that were the most traumatic while they were happening, I look back now and say, best thing that ever happened with me. It's a thing that really, it was a kick in the ass I needed. I don't want to have to go through that again, but those were the real growth moments. And I think the whole world, especially here in the States, I'd have to say, because I think we've gotten more spoiled and soft than anywhere else. We're about to have our personal growth movements. So yeah, I agree. People are waking up. But the folks that are riding the fence are going to get kicked off real soon here. So let's maybe use that to segue right into weather wars. And, we're talking about money and the manipulation of money. And of course, while supposedly governments are broke and saying, oh, we may not be able to open next Congress and everything, we need more tax money. Still, they have the U.S. Air Force out there, with their bomber squadrons every single day, crisscrossing the skies and no lack of funding, when they want to cut out the sunlight, the air and everything, just the bare essentials of life. So what are you seeing down there? I also wanted to ask you, sorry, I'm just throwing a bunch of stuff out here, in light of the whole, the whole scamdemic, is that still like really kind of lockdown style in Australia? And then, of course, we'll go into weather wars from there, right? Possibly right after that. So what's happening?
Well, the weather thankfully washed away COVID for the most part, which has been great. And it's so funny, there was a few interesting elements to this. One is that people kind of forgot about it, which was interesting. Two, as soon as the floods came and people were out in the street helping each other, I saw maybe a few masks, but barely any compared to how many people I'll get into which towns flooded as well, because the biggest flooding was in one of the sleepiest towns. And so what ordinarily was full of masks, barely any masks. Unfortunately, of course, they're all washed into the waterways and now dolphins are wearing them, which is, that's, who didn't see that coming, But the element that's really powerful is that I think these people that were the fence sitters could see that the people coming to their aid were the people that they were previously, a few days before, calling, thinking that they were their enemy. And then seeing these people being the first that would come to their aid to help, and then no form of, oh, are you vaccinated before you come into my house and help me clean out my devastation? Or are you wearing a mask? Or stay out 1.5 meters away from me. Even the people that bought into that narrative were hugging, welcoming with open arms, not asking people about status of vaccination or anything like that. So it was a very pivotal moment, I think, where the community really came back together after years of separation. Not all of us, like where I am, no one separated ever. We actually came closer together and bonded over the scam because we know what's going on. But these people didn't. And so they got to experience, I think, something washed away inside of them as well, whereas like this delirium just lifted and they were like, oh, this is what it feels like to be in community. Hey, look around. No one's coughing and stuff. No one's dying because they just hugged someone or shook their hand, or are wallowing in filth because the sewerage is running through the streets as well. Funnily enough, no one's getting these acute respiratory diseases and dying on the streets and coughing out lungs and all that. Oh, that's not happening. So it's great because the narrative tends to destroy itself. And part of this is natural, and a lot of it, as you said, is engineered. So I guess that covers the COVID story. Mostly it's gone. The news is still kind of trying to continually pump that in the background, but nowhere near as much as there was. So the next best big thing, I guess, is the weather. So yeah, where do you want me to start with that? I guess you asked.
So it seems like they've kind of shifted from the pandemic now, kind of going to what seems obvious, like global warming scamdemic, right? Yeah. So that's the next kind of thing. But also, I think there's a lot deeper. We know there's a lot deeper stuff going on here. And this, obviously ties into Agenda 2030 and all this, but I think there's a deeper spiritual thing going on here, a war on a much higher plane, of course. But just curious, there was a question here in the chat in terms of the CV. What about other areas that haven't been so hit on other sides? Are they still kind of really pushing it, or is it kind of all of the news is pushing the flood fear now?
I don't watch the news, so I don't know. I just get this kind of feedback. But generally speaking, it's more covering the floods because they have, but there's still this undercurrent of coronavirus for sure. They're still pumping it. But okay, here's the interesting thing. Let me start here. 2019 is when we got the bushfires, and California had them too. And everyone around the world saw that. Australia is on fire. That was international news.
Birding koala bears and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, for months. That was, exactly. very emotive and all that kind of thing. And now people don't even know it outside of Australia, that Australia is receiving its worst flooding in like what they're calling centuries, even though I think they don't know anything that happened more than 100 or 200 years ago, but they're calling it the biggest floods like for 500 years. So what's interesting to me is that they went from showing the world that Australia is on fire, rolling straight into coronavirus. And now we've got these floods and Australia's pumping it, but nowhere else is hearing about it. I mean, people are saying, they go, if it wasn't for my channel, they wouldn't even know that Australia had floods. And I'm like, well, why is that, right? So you mentioned as well, Mike, that this is paralleling or it's mirroring a deeper or a higher plane of what's going on there. So the reason that I believe that they rush narratives or they have to roll one into another is that they're trying to keep up with what some people might call the sky clock or the turning of ages. And they have to keep up with it because the way they do everything is based on numbers, symbology, the history that they know, all of their occult knowledge, which they hide from the rest of society. And they tie everything in with their astrology as well. Like they're just trying to keep up with all of that. And so that's why we see these things working like clockwork. Like you could set your watch to when narratives change and who's pushing what. And so I think what they're doing though is they're really struggling to keep people suppressed as much. And they're also struggling to play out what their plan is and what they think they're going to achieve from it. I think that they're kind of like, they're not that sure of what they're doing anymore. But for me, what's the important part is why aren't people hearing about the floods? Well, if I look at it from the point of view of me writing the narrative that I want to show people, because I'm willing to put myself in those shoes, I think people go, I could never think what it's like to be a pedophile. I could never think of what it'd be like to oppress people. And I'm like, I can. I can. And I don't think that I used to think that I had an evil element in me. I used to think that the fact that I can think of what it would be like to blow up a building or to herd kids into tunnels, I used to think that a part of me was evil, and that's why I can imagine I can tap into that somehow. But then I realized it's actually not because I'm evil; it's because I don't fear evil. I think because I don't fear evil, and I'm very I'm getting to know myself a lot more, that I'm willing to, I can occupy that space and not fear it. And I think, I don't know, I'm not saying I know this. I just think that when people say, I could never imagine what it would be like to harm somebody, I'm like, maybe you're just afraid of some evil that's in you. Like that part of you must be scared of it, and you'll shut yourself off to it. That's just my thoughts. I don't know that that's true, but when I
think there's a lot of truth to that. Absolutely. And I used to see that in patient work, where people needed to come to some sort of realization in order to improve their biology, but because they just weren't ready to face it. And we see the same thing all the time where we're just talking truth. And of course, you see, folks that will go straight into ridicule or actually get angry at you for speaking the truth. So, no, I think you're right on there.
All right, cool. Thanks. Well, basically what I mean by that is that I put myself in their shoes and I go, why would you burn something out, show the devastation, show the families, the koalas, the ecology dying, and then roll straight into coronavirus and almost forget about their whole climate narrative. And then all of a sudden roll out this but not show it to anybody else. So I think if I'm writing that story, why would I do that? And then I would think, well, what's my agenda? My agenda is, as far as I'm aware, that Australia is the beta testing ground for the rest of the world because it's such a large landmass, relatively small population, as we've spoken about before, and relatively docile and easy to control. Like they decimated the natives' ability to continue their story and their dreaming. They took that away from them. And my understanding as well is that white man's been here for a lot longer than the stories that we're told about Captain Cook and the settlement. And he bought 3 chickens, 2 spades and 5 guys and somehow built these obelisk things in 10 years. It's like, I don't think so. So that stuff's been here for well before our white settlement, as it's called, happened. So this stuff's been playing out for a long time. And Australia has such mineral wealth as well. We have places here that are just... Byron Bay, this region is very powerful. You got Uluru, which is that massive monolith in the middle of the desert. It's like, what is that? You know, even just somebody who can't fathom that life is more than TV and beers will look at Ayers Rock, as it's called, and just go, what is that? You know?
And there's and there's like crystalline structures and stuff they're finding that are running through that and under that. And then I've even shared you about the tunneling system and stuff. That's like Tartaria Australia is a great channel, y'all. Check them out. They're really crushing it. So yeah, you're right on. And of course, Australia too, for the Western perspective, you guys are like a little ahead of us, right? You're kind of like a season ahead of us in a weird way. So that makes sense. You're kind of testing that. And so I don't want to cut you off, Tom, but I kind of know where you're going here. I think they don't want to necessarily put this out yet because they don't know what's going to happen.
Exactly. So I think they did the fires. The fires were kind of going, guys, look, the world's in dire circumstances. The world is on fire. Climate change is going to come and claim us all. So that puts that narrative and that fear of everything burning through the mind virus across the earth, right? And so then it's corona, which is everywhere. And now it's floods. And I'm going, why aren't they showing that floods are coming everywhere? And what I think is that the fires were the start of really pushing Agenda 21, Agenda 30, where they want to get people off the land. They want to get them into smart cities. They want to get people thinking that that's a good idea and that the land's not being taken from them. Because as docile as Australians can be and super friendly and happy-go-lucky, if you piss us off, you're going to know about it. You know, Australians will be pushed a certain amount, and then after that, it's like convict mentality is we're going to off with your head, son. Like, you're not doing that to us anymore. So they have to be a little bit careful. I think they know sort of how far they can push. And what I think they're doing is setting it up so that Australians go, actually, that's a good idea. Maybe it is dangerous to live on the land. Maybe we need cities for safety, you know? So you give away more of your rights voluntarily. And so with the floods, though, it's kind of like, I think they're pushing so hard for the narrative now that they can't let anyone see if it goes bad. So they need to test it on Australia first to see if they can do this next push, which I believe is a big push, like bigger than before. Before was planting the seed of doubt, and now they're trying to push. So even before aid work had been done in any of the flood affected regions, they're already talking about these cities can't be rebuilt. We're going to reclaim the land. We're going to condemn houses, and we're going to set up smart, resilient city networks and that. Like this, they're rolling it out too soon. Like even somebody who's not thinking could just go, shouldn't they have bought aid first and see if we're okay before they start saying we're going to take your house? Like that's not making sense, even to a mind that hasn't seen this coming for years. So what I think they're doing is they're rushing it, and they can't let the rest of the world see, because they're like, if we drop the ball on this one, everyone's going to know, and they're just going to be onto our little scheme. So they have to, I think this is a test for them. For them, I think it's their test. Can we make this work in the time frame that we've preordained because of the astrology? That's what I think. They're racing against the clock, and time's running out for them. They need to make this work. And that's why I feel like I've got such a strong sense of purpose here, because I know that my work is to make sure that that doesn't happen. And a lot of people around here too.
Beautiful. Bear, were you going to show us something there?
Oh, that's okay. I have a picture of a favorite painting of mine behind my desk here. It's of Uluru and has an Aborigine in the background. And anyway,
that's right. I love that.
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
Hey, Tom, can I ask one question, Bear, with the floods? Because with the fires here now, this is getting a little woo-woo, but getting a little Marvel. But dude, there is some really trippy stuff with the Paradise fires and stuff, where they were seeing the fires actually being kind of manipulated and almost like nanotech, where they were able to like direct them, and they almost seemed like the embers were alive. I don't know if you've seen any of that stuff. I'm just curious, as we get into the floods now, and we'll get into some of the evidence, and there's a lot of evidence that it's been, manipulated. But is there any, have you seen anything really weird with how the water was working or how the water was moving or anything like that?
Yeah. So we had the same. We had the same in 2019 with our fires, where people were showing like a lot of evidence of direct energy weapons, for example. With the floods, though, the way the rain fell was just not some of it just literally just dumped. It fell straight down, no wind, no nothing, no thunder, no lightning, just rain falling straight down. It's a very odd. I've seen more rain before and not the amount of flooding, which suggests the manipulation of other factors, the manipulation of waterways. So as you alluded to, like there's a lot of underground stuff here. There's a lot of the manipulation of the water. And for me, the water is super important just as an element itself, the control factor. So I'll just briefly talk about that and then I'll get into what we've seen, is that water, as you guys are aware, carries memory. It can be structured. It carries information. It's something that is utilized in many ways by many people to essentially as a form of control as well, because if you're unaware of stuff and you've just got information coming in, like who knows what's coming in from these LCD screens? Who knows what subliminal messages are put out through radio waves and your social media and that? Like if you're unaware, then you don't get to non-consent to it. You're just unaware. So it just by agreement, it's going into you. Water is very similar in the way that they utilize it and the way that it goes under the ground that people don't realize, how it follows, how the sky trails can often follow the water trails that are underneath. And people forget that we exert control. I won't call it control as in an egotistical way, but we exert influence on water. And a lot of people aren't necessarily tapping into that just yet, that awareness of it. We're water bodies. And the whole element of law is all about commerce, which is the law of the sea. And everything in that is about currency and about waters and water analogies and water. Everything's about the water and controlling the water. They're controlling us, right? That's their game, is to control the waters in many ways. So when we're seeing the weather patterns and this intense low that's literally just sitting over our region and not moving, that's not what a low does. It comes down the coast, comes from north to south down the east coast. It draws in towards the land slightly, temperature differences all change, and then it dissipates and goes out to sea towards New Zealand or Fiji or something like that and dissipates. It's what a low does, or a tropical cyclone, always. It's been sitting right above us. And even now, people are becoming a lot more aware of watching the skies and looking at some of the radar that you can follow. You can go onto the apps and watch the radar in real time, and you can see these beams holding these weather patterns in place. You can see weird stuff that you can't explain unless you've been watching the weather for a while. And couple that with, as you guys talked about, the crisscrossing of the skies and the layer upon layer. Like we've seen it, even after the rains, they're seeding on top of the rains. Yep. They're really going hard with it.
And the bunker fuel operations they do out in the ocean too. Mike Morales covers this every day. I don't know if you've ever watched his stuff, but he literally covers this every day for years, dude. All the hurricanes of late, like the big one that hit Houston, even some mainstream guys. Bear, I'm trying to remember his name. Oh shoot, it's on the tip of my tongue. He covers all the earthquakes and stuff during the 2020 fires. What is his name? Dutch Sense. And he's a little more out there. I don't know if you know his channel. He caught live a directed energy weapon like routing right to where fire started. And he was like, oh my God, it's real. It's real. They're really doing it.
Well, in the original experiments with Wilhelm Reich, with the orgone, when he discovered it with what he was doing, he first identified it by visualizing a blue arc. And that was his beginning of understanding how to manipulate the orgone, which we could loosely call the ether. And when you use these orgone devices, you can create them to create moisture, as we're discovering just with these little, homemade devices, or adversely, you can create a lack of moisture. That's why in the fires in California, you see trees burning from the inside out. You drive through oak forest and everything's drying up. Everything is just being like the moisture sucked out of it. To understand that the whole weather wars too, centuries ago, they understood that all of the elements were a continuous energy matter continuum. And, they had different ways of designating them, from the volatile elements, the fire, the air, the water, and the earth. In contemporaneous terms, it's more hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, carbon. And when you understand those fixed elements or those volatile elements, that precipitate the first stage of energy being precipitated in matter. Then it goes into water. Water is a transmitting utility. Then that is, goes right into carbon on the ground. And in fact, we have, primal water, as Mike was saying, which is generated from carbon. Any good farmer knows that if you want to hold moisture in the ground, you make sure you use amendments that are high in carbon. That's what does it for you. So none of this stuff is a secret, except for most of the people in the world that went to public full systems. And when you understand it's a transmutation cycle, and that all they're doing is what the alchemists, centuries ago were doing, was learning how to step in at any one cog, in that four-plane cycle and manipulate the elements in any way they want. We should be doing that for the benefit of ourselves, to create beauty, to have abundant agriculture and have no scarcity in any part of the planet. But of course, they're just, as usual, taking the truth, inverting it and weaponizing it. But, that's what we're doing here, in Alfa Vedic here at the farm and through a lot of our educational processes, is just trying to get people back into this really basic awareness, because it is so basic and it's something that we should be learning in grade school.
Yeah. And Tom, what I loved about one of your streams of late, after the initial floods, and I want to hear some about that, because I know it was gnarly, and also the public response of the supposed, responders, how pathetic that was. But you were making a great point about how our spirit and how the law works, and how not to be in fear, because the weathers was saying that the clouds are coming back, the storm's coming back, impending doom of more floods. And you were making some great observations about not to get into fear in that, and how there is man-made stuff going on, but we still have a lot of power over that. And nature herself does as well, and our relationship to nature. Would you mind expanding on that a little bit, and touch on whatever else you want to talk about in terms of the man-made stuff as well? I didn't mean to interrupt you, but Bear and I are passionate about this, because this is like, we talk about this literally every day.
Well, there's a few really interesting parts to this. One is that there are people that I'm aware of that they really show what's going on with the weather, but I feel that they're missing a trick. Because I feel that while they're making people aware of what's going on, they don't offer a solution with it. And it's almost like this fear cycle. And when people see that, they go, oh my God, what? They're using weather as a weapon? And then what happens to them, So for me, what happens is that I think everyone on your channel would be aware of, obviously through the work you do, but Masaru Emoto and everybody that's shown how water is a reactive element. It's a transmutating facility, like you just said, Bear. And we're mostly that as well. So if we carry like, oh my God, or fear of what's out there, then that affects our waters, doesn't it? So you've got a certain resonant frequency embedded in the water. And if it's disharmonious, what good are you to yourself or the world around you if that's what you carry? And I feel that while it's an important thing to show people what is going on in the world, as in disclosure, like for a kid, you'd go, oh, there's no monsters, son, everything's great. It's like, so they sleep at night. But as an adult, you can't be that kid that's just, there's a curtain in front of you and you just don't think there's monsters in the world. You've got to be able to look at it so that you can do something about it and be more than it. So for me, what's happening is that too many people are in this state of fear, fight, flight, anger, and trying to fight something. And I know what that does internally, because I lived like that for a long time. And I know what it did to me. It dried me out. It ruined me. It did a lot of things. So for me, what I was talking about, I guess, Mike, is that if I can control my waters, and I can control them more than they can with anything like that. So if I form a resonant harmonic frequency within myself, knowing what water can do, if you take properly energized, structured water, and you even a tiny amount, you put it next to a glass of tap water, it will change the resonant frequency and structure of that water. It will purify it. And if we're really just talking about a water plane here with water bodies, if we purify these elements ourselves, we change this in ourselves. When we're next to something else, we change that water. We can clean the waters around us, whether that's oceans, rivers, other people, whatever it is, food. And so for me, it comes down to that passage from the Bible that says that no weapon formed against me shall prosper. And what that means to me is, while they are weaponizing the weather and many other things, it still doesn't prosper against you if you connect to yourself, the source of your life here. And then by doing that, you become that energized water vessel. And then that in turn, by what it affects around you, can neutralize that, and it can't touch you. So, but it just takes, obviously, for example, you're probably familiar with grander water, and there's many other different types. They sell these little things, and it's enough to purify a glass of water, but it won't do a swimming pool. It just doesn't have enough energy to carry over into that amount. So a few people getting around Byron Bay or California or London, that's great. Is it enough to affect the waters of the whole town? It's not. Just by laws of nature, it's not. It'll have an effect, but a tipping effect, no. But as more and more people do start to take that sovereignty and to get to know themselves and get into that place of no fear about weapons formed against them, then they will neutralize those weapons as more and more people occupy that state of being. So that's that whole element of tying in all the waters and the power that we really have. And to the point, I've got a neighbor, these are friends of mine that funnily enough end up in the same street. Their firstborn is like a special kid. He doesn't speak, and he's a handful. Like, you have to watch him every moment of the day. Otherwise he's run off somewhere or he's doing something. But what he does is he's doing this every now and then. And he's just like in his own world, and he's doing this. And somebody that can see that sort of stuff, they go, he's playing with the elementals. That's what this kid who doesn't know any different to anything else is doing this. And everyone thinks that's a special boy, as in what a handful, but they don't realize what he's actually doing. He's not told that he can't see the elementals, as Bear was talking about. Like, this should be what we're taught when we're 3 or 4 years old, about the elements, earth, wind, water, fire. And then we've got the ability that we have to not exert control in the egotistical sense that we learn about, but in the effect that we have when we resonate with an element, a sacred element, and that is a reflection of what's in us. So what I've been trying to hammer home in the live streams is that government only exists because of us. We don't govern ourselves, so there's a government outside. A government is a mind control. It's not necessarily an office with a prime minister or a president. It's anything that controls the mind and the waters within. So the weather can control them, is government, or coronavirus or a vaccine is government. It controls the mind. Until we govern ourselves, there will always be a government of some kind. And until we realize that flooded cities and bushfires are not just because there's weapons being formed because of ill intent, it's because of us. That's the expression that's allowed to be out there because of what is expressed from within, where we don't know ourselves. We're not honoring the elements, the earth, wind, water, fire that's within us. And because of that, we see the disharmony outside, but it's coming from the disharmony here. So that's kind of like my whole thing at the moment, is not just saying it to other people, but getting to do it myself, because I haven't mastered it by any means. I did a stream last night where I was saying that I did it on Instagram, and I'm like, dudes that really get this and can do it, they don't have Instagram. You know, like, don't look at me like I'm doing anything fabulous. I'm aware of something that we can do. I'm not saying that I'm doing it. I'm saying my path is currently getting to know myself more deeply so that I can do that. And then once I'm like at that level, you won't know me. Like, I won't be on Instagram, you know, I'll be doing that. That'll be the essence of my living.
I've had this conversation for a long time with people, in that the weather is nothing more than a reflection of ourselves, our own state of consciousness. And then, you know, of course, people say, well, what do you mean they're spraying the skies and all that? It's like, well, how is that not a reflection of our consciousness? And, you know, just because they can identify, you know, an intermediary medium that's, you know, they think is causing damage, like, no, that's coming from our consciousness too. But just regular weather patterns, you know, and esoteric teachings forever, they would just say that would manifest in the weather. It's interesting, you know, the child, of course, who's doing all these things in the hand gestures and not speaking, as you say, it's precisely at the time when we start speaking, because now we're trying to use symbols, abstract symbols, to view our reality through. And it's at that precise point that we start losing our full spiritual sight. Goethe and Steiner, collaborated in understanding when people started losing their spiritual sight, and largely, when we started adapting language as a communication medium, and then through that, developing a way to revert back to having our spiritual sight and being able to do both at the same time. But yet, no mistake that child is not speaking yet, and still in touch with the elementals.
Yeah.
There's a reason why indigenous people did rain dances. They work, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they work.
Mm-hmm.
And so that stuff's all real. So yeah, that's amazing, Tom. And so would you mind going into a little bit of what happened? Like, I know, because as you say, a lot of people don't know about this unless they're following you or a couple other people on YouTube. So the original, did this come out of nowhere? Was this developing? And then I'd love to hear a little bit about the actual, because I am a first responder. I'm a volunteer firefighter. So I'm a bit of a thrill junkie, I guess. That's why I do it, but I'm also doing it for service. But that being said, I'd love to get a little bit in the trenches with you on what happened.
Okay, so we were keeping an eye on things for a little while. And the other interesting element of anything man-made like that is that there's got to be some disclosure. So before we get hit with this massive weather system, the mainstream news channels are telling people that there's going to be a rain bomb land on, the Northern Rivers region.
That's right.
And we're just going, rain bomb? Like, I didn't learn about that when I learned about meteorology and geography and stuff when I was studying, like, as any surfer does, studies weather, Like, what does the low pressure system do? Which way does it spin? How far off the coast does it need to be? What temperatures need to be there to make that work? And I'm like, rain bomb? Bomb? Sounds weaponized, doesn't it? Like, what kind of language is that? There's so much embedded in the languaging. So we're like, all right, rain bomb. And we're looking at the charts and seeing the way this stuff, seeing the signals, the EMFs being fired to manipulate this system. My understanding is also that it's not that these machines create the low pressure systems in the cyclones, for example. My understanding is that they manipulate a natural thing, like what they're doing with the whole thing with their agendas. They play out, for me, my understanding is that it parallels or it mirrors a natural cycle of things that they don't control. They're just manipulating and inverting that. So that's why they run off of natural cycles and they manipulate natural weather systems to create something that's not natural. Bearing in mind as well that anything made by man is below us. Man creates government, man's above government, for example. Whereas if we just serve the creator and we tap into that source, well, then we're above all the man-made stuff, which includes the weather mods and all that. So that's just an aside. But with watching it, we could see what was going on and we just knew it was going to come. But it happened twice in a row, as you said, Mike. Like, we got this 4 weeks ago and again like 2 days ago. Almost to the day, same time at night, 3 a.m. Why would they do that? Like, where are people mostly at 3 a.m? Their defenses are down, they're asleep, they're off, their consciousness is off somewhere else. They're unprepared. It's nighttime. And so people are waking up to flooding houses and that at 4 a.m. Exactly the same happened 2 days ago. It hit it at night with a king tide. Okay, so what that does to the estuaries and waterways is it fills in everything so that there's nowhere else for the water to go, so you can flood somewhere quicker. And I mean, could that be coincidence? Sure. But I mean, if you're writing this narrative yourself, you're going to run it at a king tide so that it's easier to flood at the right time, 3 a.m, 4 a.m. So that's what's happened twice in a row, and we were observing it. Now, the effect of the first flood was amazing because immediately the community sprung into action. We raised funds. We hired private helicopter pilots to come and do rescues that the military and the rescue services weren't doing. We performed rescues ourselves. We got aid out to people. We used boats and jet skis and our own resources to even start fixing roads well before anyone else showed up, with excavators and shovels and chainsaws, clearing debris, clearing landslides that were devastating. It was phenomenal to witness, because that really showed this decimation of the spirit, not the land, but the spirit of humanity for years now, based on the whole corona crap. And now it just like lifted. It's like, this is what humans are capable of. And you guys have said, it's no secret, I've said it a million times as well, that I personally didn't see people snapping out of their delirium without a complete disaster to unify people. Because we've seen it a lot of times. You see it after 9/11, or, you know, it's all engineered, but you see that people come together when there's a need to unite. Prior to that, they're swearing at each other and punching each other. And then not long after the event that brought them together, they're back to doing that. So that's the latent level of consciousness. And then something comes through to unify and it rises. But unless people now operate on that level, the entropy is always going to mean that it comes back down to where it naturally wants to sit, like waters. Like the floods will come, the waters will rise, but there's a natural level that the waters will want to sit. And our consciousness reflects that, I really think. So that's kind of what we see. But because they keep pushing us, this consciousness is staying up. And there's a lot of autonomy. And as I said before, I feel that freedom comes with full responsibility, and people are stepping into that, which is great. There's also a lot of infiltration and a lot of other stuff that starts to come as it will. But overall, it's been fascinating. And I'm like you, Mike, you know, I've been a lifeguard. I like doing rescues. I like being the guy that'll just, you know, go up into the hills with a machete and some ropes and help put bridges in for people to be able to walk. Like, I like doing that sort of stuff, partly out of service, but partly because, hey, I just think that's fun. And so, yeah, we've been doing a lot of that. I got to ride in the helicopter with the pilot who was that's an interesting story, because the people that had this idea and pulled it together, they rang more than 50 helicopter charter companies. All of them hung up within a minute. They're like, no, we're not going to do that. We can't do it. We won't do it. We don't do those sorts of things. And we're just going, why? Like, what? Why would you? And then we rang this one guy, Carl, who was from 2 states up, like a 3.5 hour drive. Before he's even hung up the phone, he's like, I'm getting in my chopper now. He just comes straight down and he's doing all these rescues. And he said, you know, a few places he's hovering above because there's been a call out where there's a lady trapped with a cat and all this sort of stuff. And there's a military chopper that's been circling for about 45 minutes doing nothing. So he's trying to radio them on 3 different channels. No reply. They're ignoring him. So he just goes to hell with it. And he just swoops in and grabs these people, comes back out before these guys can do anything, the so-called authorities. And he's like already got them out. And they chase him back to the airfield. They're like, what are you doing? And he thought it was going to be a fight. He gets out of the helicopter going, I think this is on. Because the police that have followed him back and they're like, what are you doing? He goes, well, you guys weren't doing anything, so I did it. And that's pretty much but he's a gun pilot too. I mean, there couldn't have been a better guy. It's funny how these things fall into place. He grew up mustering cattle with a helicopter. And that takes real skill. Like, you have to know how to come in real close to the ground, get into cattle, come back up, like fly it this way, fly it that way, stuff that other people can't do. And he's doing some of his rescues on the precipice of somewhere that's like had a landslip. And he lands with just the front edge of the skids of the helicopter. That's his landing. The rest of it's not it. And he's just got it sitting there so the other guy's out throwing food out to people. And other people that are pilots flew with him and they're like, we haven't seen anyone that can fly like this guy. So he's like this rogue renegade cowboy dude that's in a chopper doing rescues. It's like, you couldn't write this stuff. It's just been
what a badass.
Yeah.
So wow. So when those military guys came out, they basically it just squashed it and they were like, it was cool, or was it just like basically he was just a better pilot and they were like, okay, props to you? Or what? I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah. Well, he was a better pilot and he was willing. Look, I don't think that most people on the ground representing the military, the police, the rescue services, the people trying to do volunteer aid, I don't believe that they're trying not to do good work. I think they want to help, but they're hamstrung by their affiliation with their governing body, which is the military, the police, the SES, the emergency services, and they want to help, but they're told not to. They might not understand why, or they're told a reason that makes sense. Hey, don't go in yet because it's not safe yet, or don't go in yet because the insurance isn't in place, or some reason to make them believe they're doing the right thing, even though their heart's saying, I should be in there. Should I be in there helping? Like, why aren't we getting aid out? Why aren't we rescuing these people? Part of them will do that, but like any human being, which is easily programmable, if we can rationalize the reason and believe we're doing the right thing, even if our heart's telling us otherwise, well, we can happily do that. Like the people that will, what was that? I think it was Stanford prison experiment, where people were happily going to execute somebody or electrify them or something, despite them knowing that's not the right thing to do. They were like, oh yeah, well, obviously this is the right thing, so I'll do it. And human beings are very easily programmed to do that if they don't think for themselves, and that's a lot of people. So then,
no, I was just going to say, in that experiment, they had authority figures who were doctors, and the same people that would not shock somebody else. But then when the doctor said, no, do it, then they would do it, even though they'd cry while they were doing it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So was emergencies? I would love to be there, just listening on the radio and seeing, because usually you have obviously a chain of order here, a chain, and so obviously people on the top were giving the order to not go in, because usually there's a protocol. Like I do training on this, It sounds like they were stopping them from going in. So I mean, which makes sense. This seems like an entire operation, right? We know how they run these. So did you get to talk to any emergency service? And also, was there any weird COVID stuff? Like, were they requiring people to wear masks and stuff while coming out? I mean,
not masks, but there were verified reports of people turning up to an emergency hub to offer assistance. And they're like, where's your vaccination status? They go, well, I'm not vaccinated. That's ridiculous. And they go, well, you can't help. So they were turning away help based on vaccination status in some parts, in some regions. So that definitely happened. I did speak to some SES and military. And that's what I mean. A lot of them are good people, but they were just hamstrung. And when the military turned up, I don't know if you guys are seeing this, but people were documenting them getting out of all the trucks that they bought in, and they just set up like a trailer with some junk in it and take photos and film it and then get back into the truck and drive off. And people are like, what is that? They're staging photo ops so that the prime minister can use it and make it look like they're doing something, but the military's not doing anything. And then finally they came up into the hills and they're like, man, that was demoralizing being down there, picking up nappies. Like, we're so glad we're here doing some real work. Like, we trained for this stuff. We want to help. We want to do some heavy lifting. And eventually they did it. And you could tell that there was this unspoken thing of yeah, we know that was weird and you guys didn't like it, but we were just doing what we were told, and they were really happy to help when the chips were down and help for real. But the interesting part about this as well is that if the military had rolled into our streets a few months ago, we would have been like, why are you here? You can't be here. What's going on? We'd be knocking on their windows. Why are you here? What are you doing? Who's this? Who's that? Get out. Because we know the agendas and we wouldn't let them come and occupy this land. But with the Trojan horse of coming in to help with a flood, way too late, by the way, after the community's already done a lot of the work. Well, now there's hundreds of military vehicles in our street. We've got a main hub in Byron that's like a sports center. The entire car park that usually houses the full local farmers market with hundreds of cars and several stalls, that's filled with military vehicles. And so it's a Trojan horse, it's like, here we are.
Still at this time, they're still there?
Yeah, they're all there. All military vehicles everywhere, of varying kinds, from Humvees to Jeeps to massive all-terrain vehicles, big trucks, big equipment. They've got all their stuff in here. So I'm just like, they've used this to get all of this stuff in here now. It's within this region, which before we would be like, you're not having that stuff in here because we know what you guys are here for. And so that's a little bit of, we're keeping an eye on that because they've absolutely got an occupying force on our lands here. And it's really important that people keep an eye on it. And it's really important for people, in America and other places to see what's going on, because you can see what's going on here and think, all right, well, is that a possibility here where I am? If something happened, how would we respond? And some valuable lessons have come out, which are communications. They went down almost immediately. By design, they actually cut the communications because the same cell towers that carry one signal were still beaming out other carrier signals. So it wasn't the cell towers that went down, the signals were cut. So people were unable to really communicate properly. Now, for 2 years, we've been holding community meetings to talk about being self-reliant with communications, food security, fuel supplies, everything. But because you can still go surfing and you can still drive around and see your mates, no one really implemented it. Few did, a few preppers were ready. Not enough people did. So it shows the need for communications first and foremost, which means things like CB radios that people have charged, ready to go at all times, and ham radio. Ham radio is very effective for communicating and it doesn't rely on some of the signals that could drop when there's a blackout or the signal's turned off, for example. So communications is very important. Having some fuel and food supplies so that you're not in a panic, you can sit calmly and just assess before you need to do anything and accept benefits and privileges, which always comes as an exchange of value. What are you giving up in order to get? And then being aware of what transpired, what was a series of events. And then you can see what happened here, as in the authorities, so to speak, were very like tiptoeing around the edges, waiting, like vultures waiting almost. And then they come in, and then what happens? So we have infiltration groups. There's a group here called Resilient Byron. They're part of Resilience New South Wales and Resilient Lismore, which is the town that was hardest hit. And these people are all part of the climate change, New World Order, Green New Deal, 2021, 2030 agendas. And they're masquerading as the community operations. And they're saying, bring all the donations to us. And they're actually taking credit for stuff that the community did. And people aren't really pulling them up on it. And they're trying to ban people from having a voice as well. They're like, we'll silence you. We're the voice of the community. So they're pretending to be a private community group, but they're part of that agenda. And a lot of people know it, but more people don't know it. So people need to be aware of that even within the first responders, you're going to have infiltrators in there, and you've got to be aware of how that's operating and how to manage it. So then by the time it rolls around, if it rolled around to somewhere else, you can be aware ahead of time of what potentially can come. And that's why I'm keen to speak to anyone from overseas that wants to know what's going on, because there's a lot of valuable lessons to be learned from what we're experiencing.
A few months ago, I was brought in. I went to a couple meetings, just sat in, didn't say anything. Voices for Choices down in Australia there. Has that gone anywhere? Not really, because when the chips are down, a lot of those celebrities don't really want to share the videos that we do, because they're like, well, I support it morally, but I'm not going to share it because I'll lose a sponsor, or they'll shadow ban me on Instagram or something. So, I mean, yes, it is sort of going somewhere. It's just heartening to know that number of people in those industries that you assume are switched off are actually switched on. And then that in itself, that knowledge itself can help to activate the common man on the street, because they're like, there's more people out there than I think. And so it plays a role in that respect. But as far as it kind of making inroads into the narrative, not so much, because not so much. Just another comment, because I come from another generation. Before I did the whole doctor thing, I was a full-time professional firefighter, paramedic, and, lived it full time. And, we had the real professional training and the whole thing. And from my observation, our training, and I see that across all the services, fire, police, military, it was much different back then. It was much less bureaucratic. And if there was something, like, for instance, if you were at a scene of an emergency and somebody's holding you back at all, you just say, F you, and you go in and do your job. It wasn't as much of an authority thing. We were all just trained to be a little bit more autonomous. And I know, I just really think there's something to that, because people operate different now. Especially in our military here in the States. Do you think there's anything to that in Australia there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, people these days are so indoctrinated into that bureaucracy that they'll literally stand back watching someone have a heart attack and go, I'm not allowed to help. I don't have a license to put my hands on you. It's like, what kind of thinking possibly can lead to that, right? Where you just won't get involved in something because you're told you're not allowed to. Who's not allowed to do stuff? Kids. You're not allowed to watch
Yeah.
TV. You're not allowed to leave that part of the house. You're not allowed. A kid takes orders and they're allowed to do stuff. An adult doesn't do. Adult acts from knowing, from responding. That's what an adult does. It's this kid mentality that's what they're beating people down to, is to just fear repercussions of some kind. It's just, anyway, that veil's lifting, hopefully. Like, that's a big spell. Like, I know you guys listen to, Mike, you listen to Owen as well, Owen Benjamin, and he talks a lot about breaking spells. And it's a big thing. It's a real big thing. And I think a comedian has a big role to do that, because I was talking about this with him when I was on his stream last, that he can talk about stuff that we don't necessarily get away with, because he's a comedian and he has comedic license to speak about certain things a certain way and use certain words that I'm not going to use on this kind of a stream. People are like, what did those guys say? You can't say that. But a comedian can. So, like, he's got his role as a spell breaker and he's really good at it. And we all do too, in our own ways that other people connect with in other ways. And I think it's really important, because that's a spell. You know, we're in this childlike state constantly. That's a spell.
Yeah. You can't say that on Alfacast. And then, like, the green slime falls on me. Sorry, old Nickelodeon reference.
And even the comedians have gotten reined in.
Oh, you think, bro? Like, comedians are basically almost a dead deal right now. There's very few that are actually doing anything. Hey, speaking of communication, I had an amazing chat with actually your friend Bear Michael Petrano, who's doing the Liberty Horizons actually in private. It's all about working in the private solutions conference in San Diego next month. I'll be at. But so I have one of these Kenwoods here because as a volunteer firefighter, we get these and they work off the repeaters. He's actually was working on building a private communication system group going across the entire United States, bouncing off these, because we can actually use these towers. Like, we can use them. And so we're considering, Bear, I didn't even talk to you about this yet, developing our own club here up here in Jefferson, state of Jefferson, for a redundant system. And this is also, same as like working on ham radio. And we have people in our community now are getting their ham radio license. So even though I don't even know if you have to get the license, that's a whole other ball of wax, but I'm really into this right now. Yeah.
Michael is developing a system that basically bounced off the AM bandwidth. And, a few months back, I told you about it, Mike. We're going to have him on. And then he's going to talk about the whole radio communication, because we take it pretty seriously, too here, Tom. And he's now kind of gone off into more deeper into the legal law stuff and putting on summits and things. And I know friends of his as well. And we're trying to, maybe get him back, into developing the radio frequency, because that is so important. So maybe we'll have him back on and just have him talk just about that.
And we're even working on low bandwidth mesh using ham for Chordal. It won't be able to allow it to do everything, but it will allow us to get more resilient and sovereign and get off the ISPs. So we are working and developing on that kind of stuff with Chordal, because Chordal really is trying to be a decentralized infrastructure for communication, for all things that the internet's currently doing. So if we can have that working, Tom, you don't have to have a home. You can literally have a small unit here, a Cortector on a solar panel that's powering it, working with a receiver, working off long as you're close enough to the towers or to these like ham bandwidth, towers. So anyways, and it's a lot healthier, of course, than like 6G or whatever's coming. So, so anyways, bro, I love that. It's in these great times of peril, the solutions come pouring out of the waters, right? It's really amazing. So you come around now, you've had round 2. What happened with round 2 this week?
Well, we were a lot more prepared, obviously, based on what happened before. I think I put in a live stream, I can't remember, but I brought up this principle of psychological warfare that you learn when you're in sport or business or anything else, right? So the principle is this: you've got an opponent and, hang on. My computer's not plugged in. Give us a sec before it dies.
No, a funny comment, Mark Wenham on here, who's a total regular in our chat, is, will the redundant system club be anything like the Mickey Mouse Club? Inquiring minds want to know. And I said, yes, Mark, but without the pedos. So, but yeah, no, yeah.
Disney's really showing their colors lately, man. They're really getting called out.
Oh man. But yeah, no, how fun is that? Let's create our own clubs. Let's develop our own communication across this great, across the country. And then, figure out ways to get across the pond too. But go ahead, Tom, though.
That was a lucky one, because when I get that low battery signal, I've got like 20 seconds to get it plugged in before it'll just die on me. So I was in the zone there and I was like, where's the plug? But so
you've gotten quick.
Yeah. With the opponent thing, it's like, if you really want to break somebody, you want to break their will, you don't just like stay ahead of them, because what happens is if you just you're constantly kind of beating them, for a lot of people, that'll invoke what I call an underdog syndrome, where the underdog eventually, how that people can be 50, 100 points down at half time. And they're like, nah, let's get it. And they just bang and they come and win the game, right? But the way you can decimate somebody is to bring them down and then let them come up. And they're like, oh, we're winning. And then when you go and you trounce them, they'll just go, pfft, and their will is gone for a lot of people. I'm generalizing. But so when you flood a place and then you see the community spirit, we're rebuilding, we're doing this ourselves, we can find a new way, and then it comes again, like that's pretty demoralizing for people. Thankfully, though, the spirits remain high, and that's really good to see, because a lot of us have just been kind of passing on the message. It's like, it doesn't matter. You've just got to have a foregone conclusion in mind, chosen the end result, and then not having an attachment to how many times around the bush you got to go to. It's just, that's happening no matter what. Like you said earlier, Mike, it's like, it might not even be in this lifetime. And that's getting out of the childlike mentality, because some people around here too, they get a little bit too like, I need credit for the stuff that was done. I need people to know that I came up with that idea. And I'm like, well, that's not the right way to go about it, because you'll eventually run out of energy doing anything. But you've got to be willing to do that so that others can come back over what you've done to then move it forward, and not need the credit, not need your name on that thing that gets out. Let the other people put their name on it. If you want credit for something, that's a childlike thing. So even with this, it's like, it doesn't matter how many times you have to shovel the mud, just keep shoveling. Eventually you'll get tired and not want to do it anymore. But you'll have paved the way for others to come over and keep shoveling, and they'll get tired, and then more will come in, and eventually the job will get done. And it's to have that mentality of, I only need to be of service now. Am I doing what I can and doing the right thing now? And if you are, the things will fall into place. You're setting that tone, you're putting that frequency out. But the moment you're like, this is a losing battle, there's no point me doing this, no one will ever know that I did it, who's going to pat me on the back if nobody knows that I was the one that shoveled that mud? Because now there's more mud. All that work I did has gone to waste. And it's like, no, it hasn't. No, it hasn't.
That's what the Oscars teach us. The Oscars teach us that we should, to be recognized for all, our great art. And that's part of the PSYOP, right? And Matt Belair, Bear, you were just texting him or messaging him right before we started the stream. He says something amazing in every one of his shows. Do at least 3 kind acts a day for somebody and don't tell anyone about it. And that's just this little thing. And that's so true. And there is an Akashic record keeping track of all this. So if you really need to know, like, it's being recorded, it might not be on Instagram, but it's on, it's somewhere. It is being recorded, y'all. But right on.
That's the flip, that's the inversion, is that it is being recorded, but like the hierarchy in law, for example, and it's just a construct, it's just to be able to illustrate it, is that you got the creator creates man. What you create, you own, and you're supposed to, you can't serve 2 masters, you can only serve one. So man's never supposed to worship earthly kings or form government. And as soon as we did that and we start worshiping celebrities and making kings and giving them riches, then by default, you can't serve the creator anymore. So you've cut yourself off from your source connection. So then likewise, what you just said there, Mike, it's really interesting, because a lot of people, they want the validation from someone around them. And so therefore they're actually dishonoring the element where that is, like every blade of grass has heard everything you've ever said and knows everything that you've ever done. But you don't know that. So you assume that nobody's given you attention or validation or anything. So you go looking for it on, if I can get another 1,000 followers on Instagram this week and another 20 likes, then I'm doing well. But because you're focusing on that, you're actually cutting yourself off from where it counts, where it's really known. And that's that. Like I wrote in my ebook, I put a bit in the back and I said, whoever climbs a mountain in order to like vlog it and talk about it and all that, it's like they miss the power of doing that. But if you climb a mountain and tell no one, then you'll be able to move mountains within. Because it's almost like you have this experience in you that should be able to be recognized. You shouldn't have to say it. I climbed a mountain and it did this and then that happened. If you've had the experience and you've gone to the depths, people will feel it in you. Like a mile off, they're like, wow, there's something about that guy, you know, like he's powerful, or I feel calm around him or something. But if you got a blab about it, then the experience wasn't really internalized and you've lost it. It's like light that you hold within you. And as soon as you, or like something valuable, as soon as you open it up to everyone, it scatters out and it's no longer of value. So it's a real thing, a real lesson. And I've had to learn it. I was one of those guys that wanted everyone to know what I did. So I felt good about it. And then after a while, as I was growing up, I realized I'm like, no, I only have to please myself. Like I ask myself, am I pleased with what I did today? Did I really do what I could to be of service today? And then if I can sleep at night because of what I did, I don't need other people to know. And that's a very freeing thing as well. That's I'm just sharing my experiences because maybe someone might relate. I'm not saying this is the right thing to do, but for me, when I asked myself that question, I stopped looking for validation in little ways, because we all have these shadow things based on traumas that we don't tend to get to heal until we can start to look at traits like that, where you will do too much work, you will do too many things. And it's not necessarily because anyway, we can get into traumas, there's a long story, but the element of it that's important is realizing that if you can please yourself, which is different from just being super selfish, as in all I did today was eat pizza and watch movies and I'm glad I did it. It's a very subtle thing.
Because we know that's a disservice to yourself.
Yeah, exactly. So there's distracting.
Bottom line. Go ahead. Ben. No, you finish, please.
Well, I was just going to say that there's a lot of inversions in all of that. Exactly. So it's in the service to others. And the big part about these floods is that it's showing people or allowing people to find value. They know that by helping somebody else who couldn't get food or something, they feel so good about that. And they've found a place for themselves. They've been of service and provided real value, not like the fake value that this system almost entirely depends upon.
And, it all boils down by being separated from nature, because you get people that live in the country, that farm, that, aren't in urban centers, are just naturally not as involved with all the things we're talking about. Isn't it curious that all the celebrity consciousness and the folks that are up on all the technologies and Instagram and networking, it's all basically urban. I lived in, we've always lived kind of off grid and out in the boonies. And so we've just never been really understanding what's relevant in the, urban environment. We lived in Fiji, we'd, be on these outer islands in Fiji surfing, and they had no idea who the president of the United States was. They had, no care in the world. And when it came to a community and still up in places where we live now, if there's something that needs to be done that's affecting the whole community, you just get up, roll up your sleeves and do it. You aren't waiting for somebody else to do it. Our kids were, in college years were, down in Southern California there. And Mike, you'll remember that one of my kids, dated a few celebrity types and everything. And I remember we'd go down there and go out to dinner, and there'd be somebody famous at the table, and he'd introduce us, and we'd say something like, "Oh, so what do you do?" And they're like, "Dad, this is so and so. They have their own movies." And so anyway, it's very freeing to be the point I'm making, get to be cut off from all of this kind of nonsense and really be grounded in with what matters. And you're so correct with your analogies of just a blade of grass, because when you are out in nature, everything is in perfect perspective, and it's not just about me. It's you're tuned in. There's just a continuum that you're aware of, and it's a marvelous thing, and it's a sad thing that people are cut off from that. But I think we're getting back to that, and this is what all these experiences are for.
Mm-hmm. Yep, especially when people like experience nature to that degree, because if you don't get out and experience nature enough, nature will come to you and it'll come through your door. So yeah, it's like the floods, honestly, it's like, yes, it was devastating, but there's an unfathomable humbling experience from going. So Lismore is the name of the town that got hardest hit. It's about 45 minutes west of the ocean from Byron Bay. It's one of the first towns settled because it's on a river. And the rivers were obviously used for trade to bring supplies and food. So they settled a big town out there called Lismore. Now, if you look at Lismore, there's a lot of churches there. If you look at the lineage of mayors, which I only looked at yesterday, the mayor of the town, not Mary's in a horse, and you look at the photos of them, they're in the most amount of Freemason garb I've ever seen, these big tassel jewel things and I'm like, I already knew that, but I never seen the pictures until I started researching the political aspect of Lismore, which I did yesterday, so I can notice them. But it's been known by me and people in our circles for a long time that Lismore is the pedophile central of this area. There's a lot of underground stuff that goes on there, a lot of child trafficking. The cops run a ring around it that's very protective of the area. It's a bad place. People who are sensitive to things, they don't feel good going to Lismore. There's certain towns you go to that it's like the energy of the place isn't right. And it's for good reason. That's one of them. Waters, as far as my understanding go, are there to cleanse. And so sometimes where there is this natural element, the waters are there to cleanse what man is not doing. Like I said earlier, and I totally agree, Bear, we bring the weather, I think. And so if we're not doing it because we're not cleansing ourselves, well, then the waters will come to do it for us. What that means is when good people know of evil and don't do anything about it, well, then we're allowing that, we're involved in it almost, and it has to be washed away at some point. If we don't clean it up and we don't knock on doors and go, guys, this isn't acceptable in this town, if we don't set up community safety networks, if we don't set up awareness campaigns, if we don't do it, nature will. And if we don't revere nature and respect the elements, the waters, well, then they'll come through your door and just go, hello, you ignore me, I'm going to show you who I am. And that's what I believe went on. But, you go into the streets that I've been to a lot because I go through there to go to other places. There's washing machines and fridges in power lines 5 meters in the air. There's caravans on top of roofs. There's just, being in the ocean, Bear, like you get a feel for the water. You do diving, you're in big waves, you get a feel for it. But to see that, like you can't kind of imagine it until you see it. You're like, that amount of water. And,
that's like 2004 tsunami style, that hit Thailand and stuff. How many deaths were there? Or have there?
That's an interesting thing. So how many people genuinely died of COVID? 0. How many people did the media say died of COVID? I don't know, 4,282. Like put in a random number on Google, it'll tell you that many people died of COVID. And then they said, I think 4 people died. But amongst the community, we're like, there's probably over 400 unaccounted for people. So they're lying about the amount of people that went missing.
Dude, this is like Paradise 2.0, bro. But,
it's like the Santa Rosa fires, even a few years before the Paradise fire, there's still people unaccounted for, and how many thousands of homes burned down. Where did all those people go? It's just all these unsolved mysteries to this day, years later, just all suppressed.
Are they, with Paradise, one of the tragic things is they weren't letting people come back on their property because it was too dangerous and all this. Are they doing the same nonsense there?
Exactly. So what I've done is I made a point. We're putting out a circular. We're funding this amongst the community. We've raised $20,000, I think, for this particular project. which is to put together a booklet that looks like a government booklet, not personating a government, just looks same font, same photo style, so it looks official, with all the information about what's going on and how to handle it when somebody comes to your door. And I've done some videos on it for people, which is that you don't have to let anyone onto your property without your consent, and how to handle somebody, how to handle the offer of someone coming to your door who represents a corporation who is going to say, we want to come and do an assessment for you, right? So what they're implying is that they only have the authority to be able to assess what's safe and not safe, what's healthy and what's not healthy. And who needs that? A kid. You need your parent to come in and go, oh, actually, this is filthy. That stuff's bad for you. You can't go here. You need to clean your room. You need to get out of your room till it's clean. And you'll go, okay, mummy, daddy, because I trust you. You look after my health and my best interest. We're not children. So when somebody comes to your door and says, we're going to perform an assessment because it may be unsafe for you to live here, you can just say, well, thanks for the offer. I appreciate your concern. However, I believe I'm more than capable of assessing my own health and safety in my living environment. Your services aren't needed. Thanks for your time. See you later. And just get them out. That's all you need to do, because it's only an offer. They represent a corporation. Even the local council, the health services, they all carry business numbers. Therefore, they represent a corporation. It's no different from a plumber turning up and saying, hey, I'd like to do your pipes. I'm $80 an hour. Do you want me to do the job? Yes or no? You get to choose. No plumber can come under their business and say, I'm doing your pipes, get out of the house while I do it. By the way, you'll owe me $8,000. That doesn't happen. And the same thing when the government or some health agency authority comes to your door. They're coming there for you to accept the offer that they will assess it to be unlivable. And therefore you grant them the right to go, well, we'll compulsorily acquire this home or condemn it, or compulsorily acquire this land. And then that'll be the state's. That's their whole thing. The fires with the waters, everything. They're trying to take the land, because as the World Economic Forum tagline goes, they disclose to everybody, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. Who needs to be told when they're happy? Kids. You'll own nothing. Who says that?
And historically consistent, right before any reign of terror, as true in Australia, they a few years ago took away the guns, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we're an unarmed country, man. Like, that's why they have to try to do it here first, because try doing this in like Texas, where everyone owns 17 AR-15s and 20 shotguns. Like, no one's going to come trying to do that.
And they're probably trying. They're also not putting this out in the news because a lot of their dark spells come from the news. It come from other people across the world seeing it, and that consciousness coming in. So you're right. They're trying to keep it really controlled, and I'm sure they're curious also to see how much mind control they can use in the system with all the jibby jab folks, and I bet they're looking at that because they've also probably seeing your area as a not very jabbed area. So, right. Because Byron's pretty consistent with like up here, like people just aren't buying into it. So yeah, you're right. They're testing. This is all testing and seeing what they can get away with. But it's not that simple, because we also have Mother Nature coming in, and she's like, you want to push me around? Well, I'm going to take this opportunity to cleanse these mofo pedos out of here. And it's fascinating. And the elements are one thing I think that is always so empowering to me is the elements are alive. There's a consciousness behind the elements. Bear talks about this all the time in terms of understanding like real science and really what we understand with like when he's doing his spagyrics and stuff. There is a consciousness behind these elements, and with the cleansing of the water, fire is also cleansing, and it came through and it really cleansed probably a lot of dirtiness up here out, because we have Silicon Valley and we've got all this stuff going on in the forests here you don't want to know about. But that being said, a little story I'll tell real quick. When I was on Slater Fire, which we got evacuated 2019 in those fires, and it was scary. It was creepy. Like our whole town went dark, pitch black at 2:00 in the afternoon. Couldn't see anything. Bats were flying around. It was like, because the smoke was completely covering the sky. It was apocalyptic. And then we got called to as a volunteer firefighter. There was no support. It was just us. It was us against a massive forest fire coming towards our town. And so I was up on the first night on a rig with my buddy, who is actually Native American, half Native American. And I was talking to our whole community saying, hey, the fire spirit is coming. The fire elemental is coming towards us and we need to talk to it. And so I went into like a meditation and like kind of had my consciousness leave my body and go over the fire. It was about 10 miles north of us. And we were actually staying at this 150-year-old or 125-year-old hotel that was a historic landmark that we were going to protect. Anyways, I go and I interact with the fire and I say, no, I'm pushing you back. We don't want you here. It was an offer in that way. And I basically said, no, we are not interested in what you're coming to bring us here. And within an hour and a half, so I was meditating. I was in my turnouts meditating in the rig. And my guy next to me is like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm going to meditate, leave my body and go talk to the fire. He's like, oh, that's cool, bro. Because he's like half Native American. So he was like, oh, cool, man. Cool, man. Yeah. So within an hour and a half, 2 hours, miraculously, everyone in town said miraculously, the wind shifted and we went to an eastern. And so, we went to a westerly. So it was easterns blowing the fire right at us. Then we shifted. It was not on the weather forecast or whatnot. And within 2 or 3 hours later, we were in the clear. And now another town was in trouble. So that's my little weird story about how like the power of the elements is deeply connected with us. And as you say, everything's an offer, even with the weather.
Yeah, I've had very similar stuff. Go ahead, Ben.
I was just going to say my last comment is Mother Nature bats last, and that's just the way it is.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to share, like I had a very similar experience recently, a lot actually. And the way that I've come to see it is that the elements, God and us, are the same thing. If we're connected, then everything's fine. But then you've got the deceiver, and the deceiver preys on fear. So when something comes up as an offer and you fear it, the deceiver gets you and you're disconnected from your source. You're not able to influence the elements. But when you maintain that connection, you do. And it's almost, God has so much more power. God meaning creator, natural life force, whatever you want to see that as, has so much more power, which is what we are. We are that power. But we lose it when we're deceived and we fall under the spell and we give that power away. Willingly as an offer, as an exchange. Here's the offer. Yep, you can take my power. And then they utilize that to influence things like weather as well and use the weapons that form against us. So just quickly, I've been doing a lot of stuff myself as well with ceremonies that I've been doing for myself. And I'll tell you the things that have happened. It sounds like I'm tripping, but we did a couple and I invited other people to join at the same time. We were supposed to have the heaviest day of rain 3 days ago. We woke up, it was a little bit blowy, a bit rainy, and then the sun came out, blue skies for the rest of the day. Then 2 days ago, I did a ceremony pre-dawn at Cape Byron. It's a very powerful spot. First place the light touches, lots of mineral wealth under the ground, very special place. And I did my thing, looked up, and there's, you know how cloudbusters work, and there's like, it clears a ring, and then there's no cloud in that spot. I looked up and I kid you not, it was not totally clear, but you could see blue hue through it. And this is pre-dawn, like the sun's just supposed to be coming up. Later in the day, I did the same thing. And then the wind completely dropped. Birds started, you could hear the birds, you could hear the insects, and another one at night. And it's too many things in a row that it can't be just like, I just chose the right time to. And I'm also not saying that I did it, because I don't even know if other people experienced the same phenomena, because I just think I'm meant to see it. And by seeing it, it means that I know that I'm shifting these elements in myself, and therefore I'm seeing it out there. Maybe others could see it or not. I don't know. It doesn't really matter to me. But I just thought I'd share that because I think it's so important to know that we can have that kind of, we do have that power. There's a couple of other things I've been using. One's this tensor ring, which Bear, you'd be familiar with that sort of stuff. It's it's a tensor ring. And then this baby, have a look at this. Looks like an alien.
Oh, love that.
And that's got a 15 hertz pulse that goes through it. And it's got 13 of these, which is this ball thing. That's one of these, or a few of these, that are rolled over each other and flattened. Apparently, when you hammer it, it makes it even more energetically strong. But then this thing.
Is that like orgonite dreadlocks? What is that?
Yeah, it's actually copper, but there's an orgonite rock that goes in it, and you run a 15 amp current, a 15 hertz current through it, and this changes a lot.
Very alien.
Yeah, we have these power wands here where we run different frequencies through.
Yeah.
And this is an organite rod, and it has literally a cable, an audio cable. We run into it, and we play with different frequencies to create rain clouds and break up. This stuff's real, y'all.
It is very, but here's the part that I haven't shared quite yet, is that this, as powerful as it is, I know that exists in me somewhere, and it's like all the stuff that people wear, all these Tesla pendants all over them when they go into town. I don't wear anything like that because I know that I am my source of protection. My electromagnetism comes from within me, not from something that I wear on me. Yeah, they help, but I think that they help to the degree that you haven't found that in yourself yet. So while I am using these because other people are using them and I want to help them keep their network strong and that, I know that that's in me. And by me activating and finding and activating this within me, because imagine how you'll feel if you carry this to the cliff edge to do your thing and you're like, whoop, whoop. Oh no, I can't affect the weather now. What's that going to do to your internal elements? So for me, like that's in me. I'm using it because I think they're powerful, but
they're training wheels.
Yeah, they're training wheels. Exactly. Yeah. Because that's us. Like that's all in here. And we absolutely have that ability. And first, I think one of the main things is for people who don't get that yet is to hear people like us talk about it, and they could think we're crazy, but we know our experiences and no one's going to waver that. Like when you've experienced that yourself, no one can take that away from you. And it doesn't matter how many times or in different ways they go, Mike, come on, mate, you can't make fire change direction. You don't influence the wind, buddy. And that doesn't influence you. Your winds don't change because they tried to blow the wind out of your sails. You've set your own sails and it can't be changed, right? So then they feel that too. By them trying to go, Mike, come on, admit it. You didn't change the wind direction. And you're like, you can't change my weather. It's set. And so after a while, their weather gets affected too, because they're like, dude, I don't know. He just seems to know. And then they start to then go, well, maybe, I don't know, perhaps. And then they start to play with the idea that they have that power within them. And that's all it needs to be for things to start changing, because at the moment, for a lot of people, the mind virus is very real. And so that spell is broken simply by the possibility that they could have power. Maybe that's stuff I've seen on the movies. Maybe that's just them showing us what we're capable of, but keeping us separated from it because it's on the screen and not within us. Maybe we can influence the weather. Maybe we do have all these elements in us. Maybe if we connect to it, we can do all these things like teleport or change form or whatever. All the things we're shown, maybe that's us, maybe. And if if it just gets to the point where it's instead of it being, no, that's not how it is, to, oh, is it? As soon as you get to that point, it's like the spell's done and you can start to recreate.
And why not? Because it's way more fun.
Yeah.
It's way more fun living like this than like watching CNN and, being on Instagram and TikTok all day and watching the Oscars and caring about who won the Super Bowl. It's just, yeah, man, I'm with you, bro. Like Bear and I talk about it. The greatest technology is inside us. It's us. So, yeah, dude, this has been an amazing talk, dude. Go ahead, Bear.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, can't come external unless it's already internal. There's nothing new under the sun. Can't be done. So, Tom, this has been amazing. Thank you so much. Always great to hear your insights and everything that you're up to. Let's absolutely stay connected. I'd like to have a private conversation with you here pretty soon and run some things by you. And just always amazing to connect. Thanks for making the time for us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Anytime.
Hey, and if you guys like this, go check, and you're just discovering Tom, or want to find out more, go check out Tom. He's on YouTube, he's on Facebook. I guess he's still on Instagram. But you're doing streams almost every day, man. And they're so deep and insightful and uplifting, and just really appreciate you, brother. So please, guys, go follow Tom. And where else, Tom? What you're doing a couple other projects. Want to share those real quick with the community?
Well, everything basically just goes through my channel. So Instagram and Telegram, tombarnett.tv, which is also the name of my website. Facebook and YouTube, just my name, Tom Barnett. Everything goes through there.
Awesome, brother. Yeah, go to his website, support Tom, and we love you all. Thanks for showing up on a different normal than our normal streaming time. Help us with the algos, give us a thumbs up. This info is powerful. The more it spreads, that's the real I'm not gonna even say virus, because it's not a virus. It's just the real holistic growth of knowledge that is happening right now. And it's just exciting to see so many people being attracted to this information, Tom. And I know you're seeing it on your side of things too, because it's happening, it is happening. And that's a race. You're right. It's a race against the clock right now. So, hey man, appreciate you so much. Hey everyone, thanks. And we'll see you next week. And remember, get outside, get your feet in the soil, go plant something, go for a hike. Mother Nature is our best teacher, and we need to honor her every moment we can. Love you. We'll see you next time.